Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Aunty Andrea's Reading Corner. I'm your delightful host, Andrea Pandrea. I'm back. I took a week off or something, just so I could focus on getting some stuff wrapped up. Just busy. Everyone's busy. It's that time of year. It's actually just going to get worse from here on in because ding ding, it's December 1st. I can't believe it. I was going to wear my elf's hat, but I forgot, so I'll wear the elf's hat next time because I do like wearing a hat. December 1st is here, and Christmas is right around the corner. I don't know what that's going to mean for all of us with the COVID and all that, the lockdown or what have you. I know I've been feeling it a bit, just kind of going, again, the roller coaster's going click, 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 click. And, but work's been a good distraction for me personally. I hope you're all feeling distracted with something positive. I will say this. I've never been, as many of you know, hey Bob, good to see you, honey. As many of you know, I don't have cable, and I intentionally don't have cable because I canceled it years ago. I used to get all the newspapers and all the news and all that shit, and I used to saturate myself with it. And I stopped, and it served me very well for all these 15 years or so. So, and people talk about how upset they are about when they see Dr. Bonnie and all these people doing the announcements, which I admit I don't watch. I just don't watch them. I know I can look them up online, but I don't. The information filters down to me through work typically, certainly through people I talk to. So this past week I decided, because I was talking to someone, they're like, oh, I'm just about to watch the Dr. Barney update thing. I was like, oh, well, I'll watch it too. So I pulled it up. I was like crying literally I didn't even watch the whole thing. And I was already in tears. It's a lot. It's a lot of information that they kind of throw at you. And it's ominous, and it's depressing, and it's scary, and it's all these things. Nikki, hi, babe. Good to see you. It can be really overwhelming. I'm just talking about when you watch the Dr. Barney updates and all this stuff, like I never do. And then I did for the first time last week, watched it live, and I had to turn off after 10 minutes. I was crying. It was just like, oh my God, I'm sitting like rocking in my seat, just like, it just instills this incredible fear in you. I'm not trying to say don't watch it. I'm saying be careful. You don't have to saturate yourself with too much of it. I've gone through 15 years never watching news, reading a newspaper clip. I don't look it up online, and yet somehow I've managed to function fairly well. I wouldn't say I'm the most informed person, but I do find out. Things filter down to me. Like I said, through work announcements, through talking to people. I'm a very chatty person, so that probably is to my credit, is that I can still remain informed. But at this time when things are really, really tough and hard, try not to saturate yourself with too much of that stuff. Stay the course, wear your mask, avoid crowds. Right now we're in a lockdown. I really hope that we won't be for Christmas. I hope that everybody can see their families and everything. I'd really like to myself, like I said, but I've got a backup plan with the one friend in my bubble that if his family, if he can't see his family, then have him over, order in a turkey dinner made by a friend of a friend, and, we'll just make it work. So anyway, don't be too down. It's a stressful time anyway, as it is coming into December. Hey, Martha. Good to see you, honey, down in Arizona, the AZ. It's already going to be stressful enough. Like I think I mentioned last time, me and my family are doing the Secret Santa. I think it's a great idea. Take some of the pressure off, keep you out of the stores and running frantically, ripping your hair out and buying fucking toys and shit that you don't need to buy. A great idea. I actually posted online and some people saw it. And just in case you didn't, it's a great idea for saving money and making it fun. And what it was is each person in the family gets a snowman of boxes built together. There's a big box on the bottom, a middle box, and then a smaller box. Could be 4, I can't remember. So it's clothes. I don't know, clothes or toys, one or the other. I think it's toys and fun things in the big box at the bottom, but only what'll fit in that box. Next box is clothes and essentials, like clothes, socks, shoes, whatever. The next box was, it was just 3. The next box was candies and stuff like that. And then hanging on each, and you do it up like a snowman. And then each one has an envelope, and that envelope has a card or a gift certificate, or money, like cash or a gift certificate. And that cash can be $20, $50, $100, depends on how deep your pockets are. But I thought that was just a fantastic way to limit things, keep it fun. You know, everyone has their own snowman, so no one's getting something different, even though the contents are different. It's just, I just thought it was really, really smart. And so Sam, I saw you jump in and then jump out again. What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to do it here, but it's so funny, the little things that make a difference, the things that people do to make your day a little bit better. Of all people, last week, like garbage has been a big problem for me the past few months. My tenants suck at recycling and putting garbage actually inside of the bin. I'm not going to go there. You can imagine my disdain in the whole situation. So it's a constant struggle to keep garbage where it's supposed to be. And it was so overloaded last week. Anyway, I get this call on the Friday morning from the garbage man himself in person in my back alley. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to pick up your garbage, but there's a truck blocking the way. Plus, it's really over full. So I'm like almost in tears. I'm like, I have a torn rotator cuff. I can't come out there and pull out that garbage. You've got to take it away from me. And I'm panicking. He's like, no, I'm calling you because I'm going to take it, but there's a truck in the way. I'm like, well, I'm thinking, like, I've never had one of them do this. They never do. Like, no offense to them. They're busy as hell. They don't have time for that. I get it. But I'm like, are you trying to tell me that you'll come back if I can get rid of that truck? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'll go and I've got 3 more in the area and I'll come back. I'm just like, what the fuck? He's like, oh, it's Penfold's truck. So I was like, I'll call Buster's. I'll get it towed right away. And he's so nice. He goes, no, it's a Penfold's roofing truck. I'm like, right, on it. So I look up Penfolds, call them up. I'm like, get that fucking truck. It's truck 1903 or something. Get it out of my alley. It's gone in 5 minutes. Anyway, yes, isn't that a great idea? I know you're just commenting on the snowman thing. I love it. Anyway, sure enough, Penfolds calls me back. Yep, we just told him he's going to move it. He moved it like 2 minutes later. I heard him fire it up. And my garbage man came back and he got my garbage. I know it seems like a very small thing, but to me, if that heaving garbage bin doesn't get taken away, I got to wait a whole week. And do you know what happens in that week? You can imagine. So I actually called them up and I was like, Super Save Gas is called or something. Anyway, I was like, listen, truck number, blah, blah, blah. His name was Vitaly. She's like, oh yeah. I was like, you got an ace guy on your team there. Top props to him. Make sure he gets a good Christmas gift. So just wanted to share that little story because it is the little things. And if you notice somebody doing something small and seemingly insignificant, but brightens your day or makes your day a little bit easier, make sure and do go to the effort and give them their due. Call the company. Let them know that person's doing something a little bit special for you. Because not only that, they'll keep doing it for you. I can really use that guy on my side. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. I can see I'm losing you. So, no, I'm not actually. It's funny. It's weird. Like, I can see that there's 6 people watching me as live right now. And then there's only one person, poor little Nikki, in the corner all by herself. Anyway, I wanted to jump in tonight because I just kind of missed you guys and thought it would be nice to do a little something, something. Is that them? Okay. So, like I said, I thought maybe some nice short stories was a good way to go. I had introduced these Vinyl Cafe Diaries by Stuart McLean, and I absolutely love them so much. So I'm going to share one tonight. It's not something you have to come back and see the rest of next time because it'll be all contained one story. Every story in this book is about David Morley. So that's the beauty of it, is that every story you're going to recognize the characters and the hilarious things they get up to in the day-to-day life of having a wife and a husband and kids and a house and all the things that we can all relate to so well. So, but you don't have to, one story won't carry over to the next reading. It's all contained in the one. So I think it's really going to be a good way to go, especially this Christmas where people are going to be really busy. So thank you for joining me. Oh, little shout out to my very special friend, Edgar. Edgar, it's his birthday today. I already sang to you and left it on your messenger thing. So I'm not going to bore everybody with it now because my voice is starting to go. Just fatigue. So anyway, here we go. This is a story from, again, the Vinyl Cafe Diaries, compiled by Stuart McLean about real people, David Morley. And this one is entitled Book Club. So I'm just going to have a wee sip. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Cheers, cheers. All right, I'm ready. Book club. Change, important life-altering change, seldom comes in by the front door. I have to change pace. It's a different way of reading these, so just bear with me while I sort it out. Life-altering change seldom comes in by the front door. Change, be it a change of circumstance or even monumental, ground-shaking change in the landscape, tends to creep up on you. Change doesn't often stand on the stoop, and ring the front doorbell, looking around and tapping its foot impatiently while it waits for you. Change, more likely than not, slips in when you are not at home, or when you are there but too preoccupied to notice. When you're busy trying to remember some difficult thing like whether this week is garbage and recycling or just garbage. Hi, Deb. Good to see you, hon. Change is a sneak. And after 25 years of motherhood, change had sneaked up on Morley. Everything had seemed frozen and immutable until one day, standing in the supermarket, her hand hovering over a package of frozen vegetables, corn, it occurred to Morley that her daughter, Stephanie, who was away at university for the second year, might never move back home. Her son, Sam, was now old enough to look after himself at lunch, if you didn't mind scraping dry peanut butter off the kitchen counter. And Morley, for the first time in years, had time on her hands. Hey, Brittany, good to have you back. A few minutes later, exactly how many minutes Morley couldn't say with certainty, she found herself in a fog, staring at a display of dried mushrooms. She was holding a 1-ounce package of organic Mitakis, $24.95. Morley had no idea what one did with dried mushrooms. Most particularly, she had no knowledge of the evidently remarkable qualities of dried Mitakis. But she felt a need to take them with her, nevertheless. Maybe, she thought to herself, turning the package over in her hands, this is what it was like for birds. Migration. Maybe one moment they were sitting there, somewhere, staring into the middle distance, and the next they were seized by a need to get going. For birds, it was South America, the mystery of migration. For Morley, it was dried Mitakis. But before that, before she'd started to think about migration and why until that day she'd never even considered buying dried mushrooms and whether you were supposed to soak them and for how long, she'd been thinking about nothing. Kelly, good to see you. Welcome. She had just been standing there in the supermarket, staring at the mushrooms, thinking nothing. Now she was thinking about how she could have lived so long knowing nothing about mushrooms. Or dried mushrooms, anyway. This wasn't necessarily an important thing, except in a collateral sort of way. Except you should know about these sorts of things. If you are a curious kind of person, that is. Morley nodded slowly. She said, I am, under her breath. When she went to put the package of mushrooms in her basket, she couldn't see her basket anywhere. Her smile turned to a puzzled frown as she realized that she had no idea where she had left it. No idea where she should look. Ever since she'd had kids, Morley had wondered what it would be like to have time as a friend again. To have time on her hands. She had passed years imagining the things that she might do. Now that she suddenly had time, Morley wasn't sure what she would do with it. She was like the first skater at the rink, hesitating before she stepped onto the clean white ice, not wanting to spoil the perfect surface of potential, not wanting to make a mistake. If it had been spring instead of the depths of another endless winter, Morley might have sunk herself into her garden. But it wasn't spring. There was a blanket of snow over everything. She was lost in the snow. One Sunday afternoon, with Dave at his record store, that's her husband, at his record store doing God knows what and Sam, her son, still upstairs, still asleep, Morley lay down on the living room couch. With a pillow behind her head and a chenille throw over her legs, she began to read a novel she had been given for Christmas. There had once been a time when this was a normal thing in her life. A time when on a Sunday afternoon she would brew a pot of coffee and lose herself in a book, or a magazine, or maybe even the Sunday Times. But that was Morley, BC, before children. And that, unbelievably, was decades before. Oh, this is great, she thought to herself as she stretched out on the couch and cracked her book. But it wasn't great. She felt fidgety. She felt a pang of guilt. She was so used to being interrupted, so used to having to squeeze out little moments of time for herself that she couldn't relax. She had lost the knack. Reading had become a thing she did at night before she went to sleep. She got up and wandered over to her desk. She paid some bills. But being the woman she is, Morley wasn't about to stand on the edge of the rink forever. "Hey, Jamie, good to see you. Oh, the gang's all here." She wasn't about to stand on the edge of the rink forever. Perhaps she just needed something more active than reading. Perhaps she needed to do something. A few Christmases ago, she had enrolled in a chair-making course. At first, it had been fun, but her chair had, in the end, been a disaster. It had looked more like a go-kart than a chair. She had put wheels on it. She had given it to Sam, her son. She needed something less practical. A week after her unsuccessful attempt to relax with her Christmas novel, Morley enrolled in a yoga class. She went for 3 weeks, but it didn't work out. She kept falling asleep during the deep breathing part. Something more dynamic, she thought. She let Polly Anderson talk her into joining a local tennis club. There was a tennis ladder, and new members had to be on the ladder, a way to meet everybody. Morley and Polly's names were written on little round discs and hung on the middle rung. Morley watched in despair as Polly scooted upwards, like she was making some sort of determined mountain assault. Polly headed north while Morley's little disc sank inexorably, game by game, step by step. She didn't last 2 months. The club was pretty decent about it. They refunded half of her initiation fee. Dave brought home a catalog of continuing education courses for Morley. "How to make your own soap," she said, flipping the catalog over. "Why would you do that? Isn't there enough soap out there already?" "Well, I was thinking something more practical," said Dave, picking up the calendar. Sorry. "I was hoping you might consider dolphin healing." He was flipping through the pages. "Here," he said, "dolphin healing. Page 32. A course of conscious breathing techniques to help you access the realm where dolphins exist. Once you get there, you tap into dolphin consciousness and transform the dolphin energy to awaken the healer within." "Would it?" asked Morley. "Unleash the power of joy in my life?" "Guaranteed," said Dave. "I would rather eat the dolphin," she said. Okay, said Morley. "I would rather make the soap." To make Dave happy, she signed up for a course called Anyone Can Draw. At the end of the second class, the instructor asked her to stay behind. There's something I have to tell you," he said glumly. They refunded her the course fee. It was 2 weeks later that Mary Turlington invited Morley to join her book club. Morley was delighted. She realized the idea of finding new interests was forced. This was perfect. She would go back to the old interests. She had been a voracious reader, BC. She just needed a push to get going again. A book club would help her wade through the overwhelming choice that she faced every time she walked into a bookstore. "Ray, hi, good to see you." Morley took the calendar that hangs on the side of the refrigerator, sat down at the kitchen table, and wrote "Book Club" on the first Tuesday of the next month. The calendar was normally filled with the kids' activities. The only event on it that involved Morley, aside from family vacations, was, oh joy, her annual physical. I think everybody can relate to this who has children. She hung the calendar back up. She walked into the living room. She walked back into the kitchen and glanced at the calendar, pretending she didn't know what she was going to see. Pretending she needed to check what she was going to be doing on Tuesday night. Oh, of course. Book club. Sorry, guys. It made her proud to have this social event involving her on the family calendar. She took the calendar down and wrote book club on the first Tuesday of every month. Then she hung it on the front of the fridge instead of the side. She wanted someone to notice. Morley arrived at her first book club meeting 5 minutes early. She found herself in a house full of women in business suits. Many had scarves draped casually around their necks. It looked more like a board meeting than a book club. Morley was wearing a cable knit sweater with khakis. She looked as though she were there to serve coffee. Worst of all, Mary Turlington wasn't anywhere to be seen. No, worst of all, the woman on the other side of the dining room was holding the book they were going to discuss, and it was covered with a flurry of yellow post-it notes. Morley hadn't even brought her copy of the book. All she had been planning on saying was that she had had a hard time keeping the characters straight. That was when she noticed the woman in the corner flipping through a binder of typed notes. The woman looked as if she were preparing to defend a thesis. A few of the women had begun to drift into the living room, so Morley followed them. She chose a red chair in the corner by the fireplace, a chair out of the spotlight. Conversation in the room stopped abruptly when she sat down. She sensed something was wrong. Maybe it was the way she was dressed. How was Morley to know that the women always sat in the same seats at each meeting? Dana Reagan, a real estate agent, had sat in the red chair by the fireplace for as long as anyone could remember. It ensured that Dana was always the last person called upon to talk. Dana always had the same thing at every meeting, or said the same thing at every meeting. There is nothing I could possibly add. There's nothing I could possibly add. Everyone has already said everything I was planning to say. It was the prevailing opinion in the club that Dana Reagan hadn't read a book in years. At one time or another, everyone in the room had thought about sitting in Dana's chair to force the issue, but Dana was such a bombastic woman that no one had the guts. Every eye was on Dana when she walked into the living room. She made it halfway across the floor before she spotted Morley sitting in her chair. It was a sight so beyond anything Dana had considered possible that it stopped her dead in her tracks. She stared at Morley. The room fell dramatically still. Dana was standing immobile, except for her shoulders, which had begun to shiver like a hound on point. If it had been anyone else sitting in her chair, Dana would have bellowed something rude and authoritative. But this was someone she didn't know. And some unexpected remnant of manners asserted itself. She stood there for a beat more, her mouth opening and then closing. Then she snorted and flounced into Taylor Weaver's seat. Not a moment later, Taylor Weaver came in. When she saw Dana in her seat and Morley in Dana's, Taylor sat in Allison Morin's place. Once she had settled, every head of the room swiveled as one to face the door, waiting for Allison. It was as if they were watching a tennis match. Allison, the curtest woman there, pulled up short, surveyed the room, frowned, and said, "What the hell is going on?" Exactly what I was thinking, thought Morley to herself. "We'll start," said Faye Struthers, who runs the meetings. "On the left, and we'll go clockwise." And so it happened that Dana Reagan was called upon to start the discussion. For the first time in 5 years. Dana Reagan, who had never, ever committed on a book, was on the spot. The room felt deathly quiet. Dana cleared her throat and leaned forward. She stared directly into the faces of every woman there, and then, with her eyes drilling into Morley, she said slowly and dramatically, "There is nothing I could possibly add." It was Carrie Lukoweski's turn next. Carrie was the new woman holding the book so festooned with post-it notes that it looked as though it were about to take wing and fly away. Morley straightened herself, preparing to pay particular attention to Carrie. "Oh, this will be good," she thought. Carrie, with all her notes, would explain the book to everyone. "Well," said Carrie, "I have to admit that I had a hard time getting into this book. But after 50 pages, I thought I thoroughly enjoyed myself." Carrie's voice was beginning to get shaky. Sebastian's epiphany at the garbage dump was a tour de force. Her eyes were filling with tears. His pain, her pain, it was just so... To Morley's astonishment, Carrie's voice broke completely, her sentence ending in a sob. She dabbed at her eyes with a Kleenex. She hung her head and waved her hands as if to say, "I can't go on. Move to the next person, please." Morley was trying to figure out which character Sebastian was and where he had been at the garbage dump. Next was Faye Struthers. Faye will have something helpful to say, thought Morley. With her short, clipped hair, her no-nonsense shoes, and her wide-frame glasses, Faye struck Morley as a woman of efficiency and practicality, a woman who would cut straight to the point. "It is a deeply flawed novel," said Faye authoritatively, "but at the same time utterly, utterly luminous." There was a moment of silence. Everyone nodded. Yes. Everyone but Morley, that is. Morley wasn't sure you could jump in and ask questions when it wasn't your turn, but it didn't look as if Faye was going to say anything else. Morley wanted to know about this flaw. She opened her mouth and was about to speak when Faye snapped her head around and glared at Morley accusingly. "What? You don't think it was luminous?" Morley phoned Mary Turlington first thing the next morning. "Why weren't you at the meeting?" she asked. "I've dropped out," said Mary. "That's why there's a space for you." It was too late to do anything about that. Morley wasn't going to quit after one meeting. Besides, the dates were already marked on her calendar. When she arrived at the next meeting, Faye Struthers' husband, Shane, answered the door. There was no sign of any woman in the kitchen or the dining room. "They're in the living room," said Shane as he took her coat. All of them were sitting in their proper places. Mary Turlington's empty chair was waiting for Morley. That month's book was a story set in Napoleonic France and told backwards from the point of view of a soft, ripened cheese. It wasn't made clear that the narrator was cheese until page 268. Even then, it was only a passing reference. "I found it totally unbelievable," said Alison Moran. She crossed her legs and picked up her coffee cup. "A cheese would never behave like that in post-revolutionary France." "Of course it was flawed," interjected Faye Struthers, "but it was utterly, utterly transcendent." She gazed at Morley defiantly. When the conversation marched around to Carrie Lukoweski, Morley noticed that Carrie was already clutching a wad of Kleenex. "But imagine, Carrie cried, being a cheese. The pain of it all. I never knew." That was as far as Carrie managed to get before she was totally overcome with tears. Morley, sitting there in Mary Turlington's chair, felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Morley had missed the cheese reference completely. She had assumed the narrator was an old person with a skin disorder. I may not be able to get through these unless you guys enjoy the laughter. Anyway, the next book was over 800 pages long. A novel about 5 minutes in the life of a Polish railroad baggage handler. Good luck. Morley was determined to read every page, come hell or high water. As she read, she was hyper aware of all the dairy references. The Monday morning before the morning meeting, however, Morley still had 400 pages to go. Michelle, did I already say hi? I can't remember. Michelle, I love you. What is you? Sorry, my eyes are actually blurring. Hang on. Okay, she still had 400 pages to go. By the time she fell asleep on the couch that night, she had read only 100 more. She woke with a start at 1 a.m. She brewed coffee and tried to read more, but it was useless. She couldn't keep her eyes open. When she went back to bed, she couldn't fall asleep. In the morning, Morley divided the book into sections with Post-it notes. She marked page 600 with a note that said 10 a.m., a page 700 with a note that said 11 a.m., page 800 with noon. She took the morning off work to read. She figured she would have half an hour after work to finish the last 32 pages. She felt as if she were in a marathon. When the meeting began, it was clear to Morley that no one in the club had read the book except for her. She felt a warm smugness envelop her as the discussion began. But before it was her turn, the conversation had taken flight from the book she had struggled through and had landed on another novel by the same author. A much shorter book that the club had apparently read the previous year. When it was Morley's turn, she cleared her throat and said, "I would like to bring the conversation back to this month's book," the book she had spent the last 24 hours struggling through. Everyone stared at her blankly. It was Dana Regan who said, "Why would you do that, dear? We're not talking about that book." At the next meeting, it was Morley's turn to go first. For once, she had understood the book. She hadn't liked it. She felt sure of her opinion. "The early parts were okay," she began. "But I have to say, the second half of the book..." Morley was rather pleased with herself now. She was about to try out a new expression, something she had never said before. "I have to say," said Morley, "that I think the book is deeply flawed." There was a snort from the other side of the room. "Why on earth would you say that?" says Faye Struthers. Alison Morin jumped in. "I thought it was the most important book of the decade." Everyone apparently agreed. Maybe, thought Morley, maybe I have read the wrong book. She hadn't read the wrong book. That was the following month. The month they were supposed to read The Still and the Quiet Heart, and Morley plowed through a dreadful antebellum romance called Stay Still, My Heart. Faye Struthers called her in the middle of the following week. They were assembling the next year's book list. Would Morley please bring a book recommendation to the upcoming meeting? The message sent Morley into a tailspin. The women in her group had hated every book that she liked. Every book that had confused her, they thought was a work of genius. And any time she'd asked one of the members if they had read a book that she liked, they just dismissed it out of hand. Morley was not about to bring something she loved to this group and watch them eviscerated. She felt too protective of the books she loved to offer them up to some sort of ritual sacrifice. She spent 3 days of utter agony. She pored over the books in the house. She had a crying fit at Woodsworth's, the little bookstore down the street from Dave's store. She spent an afternoon in the library, wandering up and down the rows, her fingers walking along the spines of the books. She read the jacket copy, searching for words like luminous and transcendent. She looked lost. She was. She found To Kill a Mockingbird on Stephanie's bookshelf and sat on Steph's bed, rereading the first 75 pages. That night, she went into the basement and opened cartons of books that had been sealed up since they had moved. She found a box of books marked Morley, College. She sat on the basement floor and opened it, piling the books around her. She came across a paperback copy, A Black Like Me. How could I have forgotten this book? It had changed the way that she saw the world. She couldn't believe she had abandoned it to a cardboard box in her basement. She opened another box, and then another. An hour went by, and then another. Sitting on the floor with these old friends around, she felt a wave of guilt. She had to get them on the shelves again. She couldn't leave them locked in the basement like political prisoners. She might not have the time to read any of them, but at least they would be in sight. At least she could touch them. Take one down from time to time and flip through it. Just knowing she could do that felt good. That night, she brought Black Like Me to supper. As they ate, she told Sam, her son, the story of John Howard Griffin, the Texan who in 1959 dyed his skin black, cut his hair short, and assumed the identity of an itinerant black man. It's all about walking in someone else's shoes, she said as she passed the book to Sam. It's more than just a story, she said. It's a metaphor. Do you know what a metaphor is? Sam had no idea what a metaphor was. Of course, he said. We took it in math. Morley flipped the book open at random and began reading the part where a white bus driver wouldn't let Griffin leave the bus to use the restroom. This happens over and over again, she said. He's treated with disrespect in nearly every encounter that he has, just because of the color of his skin. Suddenly she put the book down and stared at Sam intently. Have you read To Kill a Mockingbird? She asked. Sam shook his head tentatively. This was beginning to worry him. Was she going to make him read To Kill a Mockingbird? What about Little House on the Prairie? Said Morley. Sam shook his head. Now he was afraid. He had never seen his mother like this before. Maybe, he thought, it would be better if he lied about these books. It was making him uncomfortable, the way that she was staring. What about Never Cry Wolf? Have you ever read Never Cry Wolf? Or anything by Farley Mowat? Morley wasn't looking at him anymore. She already knew the answer. Dandelion Wine, she said. Dandelion Wine. Damn it. You should have read Dandelion Wine. I should have read it to you. What have I been doing? You were making supper, said Sam, trying to be helpful. After supper, Morley sat on the couch and called Sam. I want to read you some more of this, she said. She was holding Black Like Me. Then she said, the guy who wrote this book was in the war. He got too near a shell that exploded and he was blinded. He lost his sight. Then one day, 12 years later, he was walking on the farm where he lived. I think it was a farm. And his sight came back. Just like that. After 12 years. And that's when he did this thing, when he turned himself black. She got teary halfway through the first page and put the book down. Sam reached out and touched his mother's face. I told you there's always a touching part that gets me. Sam reached out and touched his mother's face, wiping the tear running down her cheek. He said, are you all right? Morley smiled. I am very all right, she said. Morley phoned Faye Struthers the next morning. She told her she wouldn't be coming back to the book club anymore. I don't need them, she told her. I don't need them, she told Dave. On her way home from work, she bought 2 bookshelves, the kind that needed to be assembled. That night, she put them together herself. She set them in the hall and filled them with the books from the basement. Old friends, she said to Dave. She's right about the books, but she was wrong about the book club. Once she starts reading again, Morley will want to share her books with more people. The books she will read will take her to the worlds beyond her own, and it is always more fun to travel with friends. In the spring, Morley and Mary Turlington will start their own book club. There will be 7 women at the founders' meeting. They will agree to 5 categories for the books they will read during their first year. Number 1, a book about a man I could marry. Number 2, a book I read in grade school. Number 3, a book that mentions chocolate favorably. Number 4, a book I want to read because I saw the movie. Number 5, a book my husband would quit after the first chapter. The book club will last for years. Each meeting will be called to order when Morley stands up and says, is there anything anyone could possibly say about this luminous book? And everyone will collapse into hysterics. At some meetings, that will be the closest they get to discussing the book in question. Some weeks, the wine and the good feelings that come with being among good friends will be all that they need. And that's it. Oh, I can't help it. Yes, To Kill a Mockingbird is a great book. I've never read Black Like Me, but now I want to read it. Anyway, there's the first sampling from this lovely collection of stories. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to be reading them whether you damn well like it or not. So I hope you'll join me. I will always laugh. I will always cry. That is the guarantee. If you can handle that, I invite you to laugh and cry along with me. They're touching tales. They're relatable. They're just stories about life. And man, aren't we all feeling life these days? And it's kind of just reminds us that it's okay to laugh. And sometimes you just have to, because that's the way to get through things. So I will leave you with that. Mel, jumping on the end there, but watch back because I think you'll enjoy this. It is getting on. It's 8:18. I'm going to go. I'm going to make something to eat for my dinner. I'm going to binge watch a couple of TV shows, maybe read another one of these chapters because I just love them. And why don't we say I'll see you on Thursday. I'll pop in on Thursday and read you another one. Hopefully you'll be into it. And so I'll leave you with that. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Remember that I love you, and thank you for joining me.